Greetings, family and friends. I want to share another article with you from Star Focus newspaper, Sunday, April 19th, 2020. On the beat, Wong Chung Wai. I'm wait. I'm not pronouncing it right. I'm sure. Okay, it's news desk at thestar.com.my. That's his contact information. News desk at thestar.com.my. On the beat is the name of the article. So I want to read it just to give perspective, from a different perspective. We always hear just one side of the story. Okay, there's growing outrage in the West following a report that China is reopening its wet markets. Though erroneous in the eyes of Westerners, these places are inextricably associated with wild animal markets. Most of the discontented have never been to a wet market, which is just a place for fresh produce. In fact, this is probably the first time they've even heard the description. So when they stumbled on the term wet markets, their minds immediately raced to the infamous Wuhan market where COVID-19 was first reported. The news involving these wet markets have added fuel to the fire of China bashing, courtesy of the killer virus. Wet markets are commonplace all over Asia, especially in Southeast Asia, because consumers know the produce at these places is fresh. Unlike the farmers markets in the West, wet markets in Asia mostly have wet floors, hence the name. The climate in this region necessitates the use of copious amounts of ice to maintain food freshness, and coupled with the use of fresh water to keep the place constantly clean, wet markets can seem a chore to navigate. Markets in the West, even those with street stalls, don't deal with live, fresh seafood. There are no tanks or tubs filled with live fishes, shellfish, or crabs. Basically, fresh seafood in the West comes dead. In fact, most times prawns are already boiled even. This doesn't sit well with Asians in generally, especially the Chinese. Asians prefer wet markets over supermarkets for fresh seafood because the difference of their freshness and choices is stark. In Hong Kong, most wet markets located on the ground floor of flats are clean and they sell an impressive array of Asian seafood. In China, I've even seen live stingrays, squids, and octopuses in tubs, which isn't a sight here. The largest choice of seafood in Malaysia can probably be found at Sabah's markets, which have fishes I've never seen before in Peninsula West markets. Yes, I agree, sanitary is a concern in wet markets all over Asia, especially at the poultry sections. The pong and poor hygiene in slaughtering chickens, for instance, needs overdue attention by the authorities in the wake of the pandemic. It should be banned, like what Malaysia and Singapore have done. But the bottom line is wet markets are not animal markets. Most wet markets don't sell snakes, dogs, cats, wolf club, cubs, or baby crocodiles. And just to stop for a minute, I can bear witness to that because I've been to wet markets and I'd almost forgot what a wet market was, hearing about this Wuhan thing and seeing the images in the media. But I've been to wet markets in Thailand lots of times. Well, not a lot of times, but quite a number of times. I don't think I've been to any since I've been in Singapore because I've been under lockdown. But all I see is live seafood in big tubs like they describe, octopuses, all kind of seafood, and vegetables. That's why I've never seen no raccoons and dogs and cats. So, okay, back to the article. And certainly, most mainland Chinese and ethnic Chinese elsewhere don't dine on these animals. In fact, as China becomes more affluent and tuned in with the times, there's growing pressure to ban dog meat, because it's simply cruel and unacceptable. You'd be surprised who eats dog in in the world. It ain't just the Chinese and the Asians. It's poor argument when some Asians report to the culinary tradition defense to justify their consumption of these animals. Pets are not food for human beings. It's uncivilized, period. Thanks to some bizarre food shows on TV, the perception formed is that Asians consume a lot of exotic meat, which is furthest from the truth. So likewise, not all Westerners eat rabbit meat, pheasants, or garden snails either. And not to mention deer, which is a wild animal, And I don't know if they eat possum in the U.S. or not. I thought they did. Okay, back to the article. And foie grass, I don't know what that is, the liver of duck or geese, fattened by being force-fed corn via a feeding tube, surely can't be staple food too. I've always enjoyed visiting wet markets in the Asian countries I've been to because I like the feel and smell of these places. It's a meeting place for people who go about their lives in a melting pot of local culture and charm. But many Asians prefer the cleaner and air-conditioned supermarkets as they regard these outlets healthier and more sustainable. Affluent Asians find supermarkets more comfortable and in line with their lifestyle. Besides, parking is also more organized than at the often congested wet markets. The supermarket's ability to buy food produces in large volumes directly from, the food market's ability to buy food produces in large volumes directly from farmers has also made their prices more attractive than those at wet markets. According to a Euromonitor International report, supermarkets now account for about half of all grocery spending in China, going up about 36% from 1995. Adding convenience stores and the like, and so-called modern grocery has about 68% of China's retail wallet, giving wet markets less than a third. Still, that store-based spending is overwhelmingly concentrated in packaged rather than fresh produce. Foreign retailers that once hoped to dominate China's staple goods sector, such as Carrefour, SA, and Metro AG, have struggled and sold out of local ventures, but wet markets are still going strong. Research by N. Chamhuri and P.J. Bhatt from Curtin University of Technology, Perth, Western Australia, on Malaysia's preferred source for fresh meat in the Klang Valley, uncovered startling results. Despite the increase in supermarkets and hypermarkets, traditional markets have aptly coexisted with modern retail formats and remain the choice for fresh meat. But Asian governments must clean up their wet markets, even if they aren't animal markets, since past virus outbreaks have been linked to these places where the potential for zoonotic transmission, disease that can spread from animals to humans, is gravely higher. What's deplorable is that the confusion over wet markets and wildlife markets has led to xenophobia among some U.S. leaders, celebrities, and the media, who are all calling for the closure of these food resources in China. They have ignored or missed reports that since January 26, China has banned the sale and consumption of wild animals for food, but with news of wet markets being reopened, old pictures depicting the sale of these animal meats have been recycled as visuals to accompany the news reports. The truth is easier to buy wild animals online. The truth is it's easier to buy wild animals online, go figure. And this may come as a surprise, but international wildlife trafficking is worth an estimated $10 to $20 billion annually, with the U.S. as chief consumer of wildlife products, legal and illegal. Yet a poll commissioned by Wild Aid found that 80% of Americans know little or nothing about illegal wildlife trade within the U.S. Perhaps after watching Joe Exotic and Tiger King on Netflix, Americans would know better and be stunned to learn that there are more lions in the U.S. than in the whole of Africa. And I never knew that, never heard that before. I'm going to research, that's interesting. What he said about Joe, whoever he was, talking about on Netflix, I suggested people look at, what is the guy's name? I forgot his name. Does a news report, Stephen Colbert. Was it Stephen Colbert? I think it's Stephen Colbert. Did a news little piece. You know, everybody's doing it 15-minute segments. They don't have the whole shows anymore. I think it's Stephen Colbert. And he talked about these wet markets and how they freaking out Americans are. And he compared them to slaughterhouses in the U.S. and disease and the way animals are raised in the U.S. He made some good points. I think it's Stephen Colbert. It was just this past week. Today is Monday, the 27th of April. So it was within the last week. I think it was Stephen Colbert that, if it's not him, it's one of them guys like him. They did a segment, about 15 minutes, and he was talking about how inhumane, filthy, and cruel these slaughterhouses and these hog raising places and these pig pens and these chicken debeaking and all kind of stuff that goes on, and how diseases come from there too. So it's not just the wet markets in China. But I just wanted to read that article because it gave some insight, and I had totally forgotten myself what a wet market was after hearing the media and about this COVID-19. And I went to them in Thailand quite a bit, and I never saw no wild exotic animal. The only thing I saw was, like they said in the article, tubs of seafood that I've never seen before, from squid, octopus, to eat all kinds of seafood. And other than that, just fresh vegetables. And yes, the floors are wet. I didn't know why until I read this article. So I hope I'm not talking too fast. I tend to do that. I don't mean to. But I just wanted to share information from this perspective. I'm in Asia, so I get a chance to read news from Asia, and it's enlightening. It's broadening. And if I was in Africa, same thing. I've been in Africa, and being in Africa, you get a different perspective. And it's eye-opening, and it's mind-boggling. I was there when Fidel Castro died, and the reporting was totally opposite from what we get in the U.S. They loved Fidel Castro all over Africa. I mean, worshipped and loved the ground he walked on because he did so much good for them. They had it on every day, special programs for an hour or two for 2 or 3 weeks in Ghana when Fidel Castro died, because he's a friend to Africa, and they don't get propagandized into hating somebody that they don't know like Americans do. And then something else I saw when I was there, and I'll leave it at this. Ahmadinejad, the former prime minister, whatever the title is, in Iran, he came on a state visit to Ghana. And America had demonized him, whoever the president was, Bush or somebody, to the point that all Americans hate him. I guess they hate Iran, they hate Ahmadinejad, think he's a supporter of terrorism and all this. He came to Ghana, the president met him at the airport, I think it was John Mahama at the time, rolled out the red carpet, had a military brigade, and they gave him a state welcome like they do any dignitary. He was there for almost a week, I think. And I didn't know until then that he was the head of the Non-Aligned Movement. He was the head of the Non-Aligned Movement. He didn't appoint himself. The Non-Aligned Movement chose him, and that's the largest body it's the largest single body in the United Nations. Those are the nations that's not with the East, they're not with the West. They ain't with the Soviets or China, and they're not with America. They're independently aligned into a political bloc that in the West we hear nothing about. It's called the Non-Aligned Bloc. And Ahmadinejad was the head of it, which spoke volumes to me. And he got such a royal welcome in Ghana. I said, my God, Americans need to travel more and see what the outside world really looks like and how they function. Everybody doesn't believe the hype, and everybody doesn't go along with that BS that comes out of Washington. So I just want to share this article. Hopefully it's enlightening. Hopefully I didn't take too much of your time. Peace and love. Bye.